How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and as always, I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hey, I'm Haley Grace.
And thank you for tuning in to today's episode. This one's a little different. This is kind of, I don't think I'm going to classify this one as a bonus episode. I think I'm going to have like a completely different category that this one falls in, because this is kind of something different that we've never really done before, but I think could be beneficial for a lot of people listening to the podcast. So
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So if this is your first time tuning into our podcast, first of all, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Usually we do, as you probably guessed by the intro, roller coaster history, and we do like deep dives into the histories of individual roller coasters. But if you're listening to this episode, it's probably because either one, you just want to learn more about roller coasters, or maybe you really don't know anything about the amusement industry or roller coasters or at all, and want to be able to follow along better while you're listening to our podcast. Or maybe this is the first time you've ever tuned into our podcast and you're just getting started, wanting to learn more about this hobby. So wherever you may be in your roller coaster journey,
What?
whatever your interest level may be, excited for you to tune in. So this is going to be kind of just a general overall guide to the amusement industry, roller coasters, and roller coaster enthusiasts, the roller coaster enthusiast hobby, so to speak. And so, we thought it might be beneficial for those of you that are listening to the podcast, but maybe aren't as familiar with, the roller coasters and the parks that we talk about, some of the terms that I use, things like that. So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about today. Just kind of thought this might make the podcast more accessible to people. And maybe if you've never listened to our podcast and you're just kind of feeling out this hobby, so to speak, maybe this will be a good entry point for you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're talking about today. I thought I'd just kind of briefly, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time with this, just kind of briefly talk about how I got into this hobby. Really started, it was kind of a long process, because it really started with me playing Roller Coaster Tycoon when I was a kid. Like that was like the first introduction I had to roller coasters and the amusement industry.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of kids in like the 90s and early 2000s that played video games, that's kind of what our introduction was. It's funny because when you're that young, you're playing the game, you don't really think about, any of the intricacies of the game or whatever. It's just like, roller coasters. Oh, I can make them crash. And like, I can, put guests in the water and they drown. Like, you can do all these atrocities that kids do when they play video games. But then you get older and you realize how much research actually went into the game. Like when Chris Sawyer built the game, like he actually modeled every coaster after real life coasters in real life, and like he did a lot of research. It's actually a pretty faithful recreation of actual roller coasters in the real world. So but that was kind of my first thing that kind of got me into the amusement industry. And then as I got older, we started going to amusement parks. We went to Silver Dollar City, which is the park that was close by where I grew up. Eventually, when I was a little older, we went to Disney World for the first time, and my parents kind of got hooked on Disney World, and so they became DVC members at a certain point. So I've been to Disney World probably more than any other amusement park. Silver Dollar City's probably in there too, just because it's a lot closer.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably Silver Dollar City, but
yeah, it's hard to say, because Disney World, when we go for like a whole week,
right? And
then Silver Dollar City, you only go for a day, so it's like it feels like you go to Silver Dollar City more times, but then when you think of the actual days spent,
that's true.
It's hard to say, but regardless, I'm very familiar with both of them. But growing up, I was terrified of roller coasters. My dad's always been a huge huge junkie of roller coasters. Like, you know, he's not really scared of any, you know, thrill.
But he's not necessarily an enthusiast.
No, he's not like involved in the enthusiast community. He's more just he's a daredevil. Like, he'll do anything. Like, he just never been skydiving, but I think he would. I just don't think my mom would let him.
Nope.
I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, he would probably go bungee jumping too if the opportunity ever presented itself. Like, he just, you know, he's just.
That does sound like Jamie.
Yeah, he's really not, you know, not afraid of anything. At least when it, you know, comes to that kind of stuff. And so, but I've always been terrified. When I was a kid, I was always terrified. And he would try to get me on rides. Eventually at Disney World, I did eventually start getting on the coasters and the big rides there. Mm-hmm. So I think the first time we went, I rode everything except for Everest. And then like the second or third time we went, he finally got me on Everest. But I still wouldn't do like any of the coasters at Silver Dollar City other than like Thunderation, which is, you know, not that big of a coaster.
It's just so crazy to me because like the coasters at Disney World are like big.
I mean, they are. The difference is Everest is like, it seems a lot bigger, but it's really not that much bigger than the coasters at Silver Dollar City. Well, it's actually not bigger than the coasters at Silver Dollar City. Some of them. Yeah. And then Rock and Roller Coaster is faster than some of them, but I also couldn't see it, if that makes sense. So having it be indoors, I think, kind of helped me. If it had been outdoors, I would have been like, you know, it's too, you know, it's all about the games that your mind plays. But but eventually, when I was 16, I went with some friends to Silver Dollar City. We had prom that day, and so me and a buddy and our two dates went to Silver Dollar City for the day, and then prom was going to be that night. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do all day, you know, not riding the roller coasters. You know, sometimes as a teenager, you only think like 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Yeah. And long story short, they eventually convinced me to get on Outlaw Run, which was a brand new at Silver Dollar City that year, had just opened a few months prior. And I actually liked it. And so then the rest of the day, I got on all the other big coasters that I had never been on. And yeah, I wouldn't say that's where becoming a coaster enthusiast started, because I didn't really get into this hobby until after Haley and I got married. It was really when we went to Kennywood for the first time. Yeah. And I rode Phantom's Revenge. That was like, I think I really enjoy being able to go to these different parks and try these different roller coasters.
Well, you even told me too that like you didn't realize how like much of a incredible coaster Phantom was. Like,
yeah, I didn't know really anything about the coasters at Kennywood before we went. I guess that would have been like 2018, 2019. Something no, it wouldn't have been 2018. It must have been 2019 or 2020. Yeah. I think it was 2020. Because I think people were wearing masks and stuff when we went, and like the crowds were really low because of the pandemic. I think that's right. Yeah. And so but yeah, I didn't realize how big Phantom was, especially because a lot of it is kind of hidden from view. About half of the ride is like down the hill from where the actual park is. Right. And so I just got on it like, oh, you know, it's probably like the same size as like Powder Keg and Wildfire and some of the other ones I've done. I got off that ride like, oh my word. I didn't realize coasters could, you know, be that intense. And of course, you know, my mind has been open to all kinds of coasters that are that intense. But yeah. And then it just kind of, at some point, Haley got me a Cedar Fair Platinum Pass. I think it was for Christmas.
Was for Christmas.
Either later that year or the year after.
Because I'm an amazing wife.
And so that year we went to Knott's Berry. I went to Knott's Berry Farm, and then we went to Kings Island and Kings Dominion and Cedar Point. And it's, you know, it's just kind of been a thing from there. So that was the same year we started the podcast. So I guess that was
that you went to
in Carowinds too.
In Carowinds, yeah.
Yeah. So that was the year we started the podcast. So that would have been 3 years ago. So yeah, 2022, I guess, is when I kind of got full blown into the enthusiast community. But I'd kind of been interested in it since 2020, and then just decided I wanted to learn more. So, and then we started the podcast as kind of a way for me to participate in my hobby in between trips to the parks, just because we don't have the money to just be on the road visiting amusement parks all the time. And so this is kind of the filler in between. So, so that's kind of my story. I know a lot of people have, different ways that they've gotten into the coaster enthusiast community, but now that I've been in this community for a while, there's a lot of things that I know that when I talk to people about roller coasters, I know just goes, it goes over their heads, which is something that happens in any, community or hobby that you get into, and other people are just like, you're speaking another language. So that's kind of what this beginner's guide is for anybody that wants to learn more about it. This is where you can learn.
What's the the book's called?
The for dummies. So this is the amusement industry and roller coasters for dummies.
Perfect.
So let's just jump in. We're going to talk about just kind of give you an overview of the different things we're going to talk about. I'm going to give a brief history of roller coasters, and then at the end of the episode, get a little more in depth. So if you want not a full history, we're not going to talk about everything, obviously, but if you want a nice 10-15 minute history of the amusement industry, that'll be towards the end. That'll be the last thing we do. But we'll start with a brief 2-minute history of roller coasters.
Okay.
Then we'll talk about different types of roller coasters, and then we'll talk about terms that about coasters and terms that coaster enthusiasts use. And then we'll talk about manufacturers, because that's something we talk a lot about on the show, is the different manufacturers of coasters.
I still get that one confused.
I know there's a hard that's the other great thing about Haley doing the podcast with me is she's not really she does the podcast with me, but she's not into the coaster enthusiast community. She probably knows more than the average person does, just because I talk about it all the time, and
more than your average GP.
We've recorded. See, people don't even know what that term means. We'll talk about it later. We've done 57 episodes of the podcast at this point. She knows a lot about roller coasters, not as much as enthusiasts, but she's learned her fair share. So, but if there's things we cover today that she's like, okay, explain that. It'll be good to have her opinion on stuff. So after
Thanks.
I
appreciate it. You appreciate my opinion?
I always say on the podcast, she's here to listen and to make me more interesting. So, and I stand by that. So after manufacturers, we'll talk about amusement parks and chains. Kind of the big hitters of which parks are most popular and the big amusement park chains. And then we'll do the full history at the end. So I will just preface this by saying we do live in the U.S. So a lot of this is going to be U.S. based, partially because the U.S. is the largest amusement industry, it is the biggest in the U.S. as opposed to other countries.
Right.
But just also because that's where we live. So there's for sure going to be a little bit of bias here. Right. So it's
it's better, easier for us to do the research here.
Yes. So I know we have a decent amount of you that are listening from the UK. I apologize that this is more across the pond from you than.
If you buy us some tickets, we'll come see you.
There are some parts we'll talk about the UK, because there are parts that are important, but so I apologize for the bias. So.
We're not biased. We just really.
We're a little biased. I'm not biased in the sense that we think the U.S. stuff is better. Just biased in the sense that that's what we're familiar with. So.
Yeah. So we're not biased. We're just broke.
That's fair. That's a fair way of putting it. Okay, brief history of roller coasters. So the first roller coasters kind of tie their origins back to the 1750s, which is so they kind of started in Russia. There were slides that were created as an entertainment venue. And in the winter, they would just be like ice slides, like for either sleds or for people to just slide down because it was icy. But then in the summer, when there was no snow or no ice, they would actually have little cars that they would put on them with wheels. So that was kind of like the very beginnings of roller coasters. And then it kind of moved into, there would be scenic railways, which is kind of a similar thing, but it was like you would have a car that would start at the top of a hill and then go down, but then there's like no way to get it back up the hill except for like pushing it back up the hill.
Yeah.
And then like you'd also have things like loggers riding logs down mountains in the like down springs and stuff that would go down. Like that would be the fastest way to get logs down, would to be riding on top of them.
Yeah.
So there's like little things that like kind of were in that realm, but nothing really was like an official.
Just like picture riding a log down the street.
Well, I mean it's where log flumes come from.
I know.
Like yeah,
It sounds like a lot of fun.
yeah. So that's kind of where it all starts. In the 1850s to 1900s is really when the first roller coasters start to emerge. But we really don't see what like roller coasters we see nowadays until like the early 1900s, mostly because the oldest operating coaster today was built in 1902. So everything that even the oldest coasters we have nowadays are post 1900. And then from the 1900s to the 1920s, there was like a lot of coasters being built. Great Depression happens and World War II happens and kind of completely stops the amusement industry in its tracks. Roller coasters come back in a big way during the 70s and 80s. And then there's an event we talk a lot about called the Coaster Wars, which started in 1989 through 2005, which was just like this huge battle for the tallest and fastest and longest coasters. And then post 2005, we have a lot of different manufacturers that are continually coming in the game. RMC is a coaster manufacturer we talk a lot about in the modern era of roller coasters. And then in recent years, in the last 5 to 10 years, family coasters have become a big thing where I think parks are seeing the value in having coasters that appeal to more people.
Right.
And then lastly, later this year, Falcon's Flight is set to open in the Middle East, and it's going to be, as long as it opens as planned, will be the fastest, longest, and tallest roller coaster ever constructed. So there you go. There's like just a brief overview of kind of how we got to this point with roller coasters. Okay. So now let's talk types of roller coasters.
Ooh.
There's 3 types. Do you know what the types are? Three materials, I should say.
3 materials?
Yes.
Wooden.
Wooden, yep.
Steel.
Yep.
And hybrid.
Good job. Did you cheat off the script?
No!
Or
I'm a good listener. I'm a good student.
Good job. High five.
Thank you.
Yes, wood, steel, and hybrid. And hybrid is that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a hybrid between wood and steel. So there's, to my knowledge, not really any other roller coasters that have primarily been built with any other material. That's pretty much all we got. So most wood was really big up until really the 60s and 70s is kind of when steel coasters exploded. It was really just wooden coasters up until then, and then steel coasters got really big, and now wooden coasters are starting to kind of fizzle out. It's not completely. There's still wooden coaster manufacturers. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but steel is definitely the primary coaster material nowadays. So.
Yep.
So now let's talk about, we talked about materials. Now these are the different types of like how you ride the coaster, so to speak, like how you sit and like the actual experience of the coaster, different model types, so to speak.
I don't think I'm gonna get this one.
Oh no, there's too many. You wouldn't get this one. So these are in alphabetical order. There's, I think, 10 of them. So, and you could make an argument for, you know, some of these are kind of similar and like, I don't know, but this is going off of, for if you're not in the enthusiast community, there's a website called RCDB, which stands for Roller Coaster Database. And that's kind of everyone's go-to source for everything, whether it's, you know, how many roller coasters are at this park, what year did that coaster open. It's kind of like the Wikipedia of roller coasters, so to speak. So, and they do a good job of categorizing things and keeping track of, you know, all these. Yeah. So it's a really good source for anything you might want to know about a specific roller coaster. So these are the category or the models that they have filtered all coasters into one of these 10 models, if that makes sense. So
yeah, there's no way I would have guessed.
Yeah, so
10. I'm like,
yeah. So these are
I might get 2.
Yeah, these are in alphabetical order, not necessarily how common they are. Okay. So we have fourth dimension coasters, which is a coaster where the seats rotate independently on a horizontal axis. So like this. So it's like
the twisted,
like Toonbeely at King's Dominion. Yeah. So there's 2 different kinds of fourth dimension coasters. There's some where it's a controlled spin, which would be like X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. And then there's the free spin, which is like Toonbeely at King's Dominion, where it's like completely random how many times you might spin on any given ride. Next, there's bobsled coasters, which is a coaster with freewheeling cars that slide down through basically a half pipe like track. Those can be wood or steel. Wood is way less common than the steel. And it's also a coaster model that's kind of dying out. I don't think there's been a new one built in over 10 years now. So, but there's still a few of them hanging around. There's one at King's Dominion that you and I have been on, Reptilian at King's Dominion. And so there's still a few of them around. Generally pretty low intensity. Floorless coasters are steel coasters where the rider's feet dangle freely above the track because there's no floor underneath the you know, when you get on the coaster, there's a floor that, you know, you walk across in the station to like get on. A few of those. And then the floor drops out and you're there's nothing underneath your feet, but you're still, you know, you're still sitting. The track is below you and Yep.
Been on a few of those ones.
Yep. Flying coasters are coasters that position riders face down in a flying position, like a Superman flying type position. So basically there's 2 different kinds that are most common. One, you get in the coaster and then it lays you flat on your back and then flips you over like after you've gone up the lift hill. That model is kind of dying out. The more common one nowadays by B&M, which we'll talk manufacturers later, but the one by B&M, basically you get in and then it tilts you into the flying position and then you go on your way.
Right.
So probably the most popular flying coaster. There's a lot of Superman coasters at the Six Flags parks. There's also Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. That's really popular. Inverted coasters, these are pretty common. They're coasters where the track is above the riders rather than underneath, and so you are hanging from the track, and your feet dangle below you with nothing underneath you. So
I like those.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So probably the most popular ones. There's a lot of Batman themed inverted coasters at a lot of the Six Flags parks. And then Busch Gardens has 2 really popular ones, Montu and Alpengeist, that are very well known. Motorbike coasters, also known as straddle coasters, are launch coasters where you basically you sit on the coaster, straddling it like you would a motorcycle or like riding a horse. So the most popular of these is probably Tron Light Cycle Run, which is at Magic Kingdom, which is a very fun one that we've both been on. It's probably the fastest one too. Like a lot of the other ones are just kind of family coasters, like Dark Coaster at Busch Gardens, which we've both been on. And Pony Express at Knott's Berry Farm is another one.
Can we go back to Disney?
Yes, I know.
Talk about that one.
Haley has a bias to Disney, an actual bias, not in the other sense we were talking earlier. She has an actual bias to Disney. So, sit down coasters. So this one's probably the most straightforward one.
Yeah.
You just sit down, but rather than, well, and pretty much all of these you're sitting down, but that one is specifically for if you're sitting down and it's not floorless, like there's actually a floor underneath you.
Yeah, it's like basically a train.
Yeah, this is pretty standard. It's like all wooden coasters are generally sit down coasters. Mm-hmm. RMCs are generally all sit downs.
Right.
So this is the most common.
I was gonna say it was probably the most
common.
My
my description here is the classic coaster design.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Stand-up coasters. This is another model that was really big, but is maybe making a comeback.
I hope so. It's the one that we rode in
at SeaWorld.
So good. My heck, it was so fun.
So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's roller coaster where you're standing up. So generally it has a sort of a seat for you to sit in, but it's basically positioned in a way that it's more like a bicycle seat.
Yeah.
And then your feet are still on the ground. The older models are known for being pretty uncomfortable, but the new one that just opened at SeaWorld 2 years ago now actually has a suspension system, so the seat moves up and down with you while you're on the ride, so it makes it a lot more comfortable. And actually, you get airtime still with that one. Like your feet come up and off the coaster floor and then come back down during your airtime moment. So those are so fun. That model by B&M is called a surf coaster. So if you hear that term, that's a type of stand-up coaster. Thing. So. Yeah. So then suspended coasters, this is a model that hasn't been built in a long time, but you'll still see them occasionally. The difference between suspended coasters and inverted coasters, because they both hang under the track, but suspended coasters have swinging cars, like the cars on the train actually swing side to side.
Right.
And so and your feet don't dangle, like you're sitting in a car with a floor underneath you, and then that whole vehicle swings back and forth. So that's the difference. That was a model that was made famous by Aerodynamics, which is a company that's no longer in business. So you really don't see it's probably been, I would guess, more than 20 years since a suspended coaster has opened.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you don't see them too often.
Not too often, but the ones I have been on, quite enjoyed. So
which one have I been on any?
There's the Bat at Kings Island that we've done.
That one
so
I think is the only one I've been on.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So, and then the last one I have on my list here is wing coasters, which are coasters where the seat is positioned on either side of the track. So the train is still on the track, but the riders are positioned off the track on the outside. There's two. I guess technically there's two different types of wing coasters. So B&M, all four riders are off the sides of the track. Like you've got nothing underneath you and the track is just in the middle. And the way that's designed, you actually have to board from two different sides of the station because the track is in the middle and you can't cross between the two sides. So you have to choose left or right when you get in line for those models. And then Intamin's wing coaster is like Sky Rush, where the two outside seats hang off the side of the track, but then the two middle seats are on top of the track. So
right, and that one's boarding interesting too.
They're like staggered.
Yeah.
Kind of. So.
And
So, but yeah, those are both classified as wing coasters, even though they're slightly different. And technically, the fourth dimension coasters we talked about earlier are also wing coasters, but they're wing coasters that have the spinning seats, so it's kind of both. So anyway. Yeah. Okay. So the only other thing I would include in this list that is kind of it's a weird clarification. There's also spinning coasters, which technically classify as a sit-down coaster because you have a floor underneath you, but they do behave differently because the cars actually spin on those coasters, so it is slightly different in that sense.
Yeah.
So, but the experience is different, but the actual, you're in a sit down, like you're sitting down with a floor underneath you, so it classifies as a sit down coaster. So, okay. Any questions?
Not yet.
Any questions from the viewers? No. Viewers. Listeners.
Viewers. Listeners. Yeah, it's a weird one.
So let's talk coaster terms now, okay? So this is going to be a lot. So, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these just because this could be.
So that's like a dictionary.
It really could be just reading from a glossary. So I'm going to.
Are you going to put like this an actual description? Or are you going to have people just listen?
What do you mean?
Like, I don't know, I'm more a visual person.
I have thought about, like, actually posting this for, like, people to read through if they want to. I think that would be beneficial for some people that would like to read it rather than listen. So, yeah.
I'm that way. I like to yeah.
I think we'll do that. I'll probably format it nicer than what I have just in this Word document. But, yeah, I think, probably put together in a nice little PDF for people to come back and read through it if they want to, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's cute, but then it would totally...
back to the Fury 325 thing.
It's cute.
It's cute.
Oh my gosh.
So let's talk layout terms. Some of this is fairly straightforward. I mean, most roller coasters have a lift hill that is either a chain or a cable that raises the train to the top of like the first drop. Some coasters have a launch, which is a powered acceleration system that, generally coasters that have a launch don't need a lift hill. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple coasters that have both, such as our very own Powder Keg here at Silver Dollar City. Mm-hmm. We also talked about bank turns and overbank turns quite a bit. That just means a turn where you're what's the best way to... It's like off axis. Like you're not just completely flat. You're actually tilted inwards or outwards, usually inwards when you're going through a turn. And that's to make the ride more comfortable, because if you went through some of these turns on coasters, if you went through without it banking, you'd get flung to the side so hard that it would be uncomfortable. So by banking the turns, they can make it more comfortable as you're going through these different elements. So now some coasters intentionally don't bank a lot to give you more laterals. Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm is famous for that. And then you also have overbank turns, which is when it turns more than 90 degrees. So you're like almost slightly upside down. So
right.
Camelback is another term we use a lot. That's a type of airtime hill. The name just comes from the resemblance it makes to a camel's hump or a camel's back. So that's just a type of airtime hill, so to speak. Usually they're very large when we talk. Usually Bunny Hill is like small and Camelback is a large.
Okay, I was going to say, so you might want to differentiate
that's usually the differentiate. Or you might also hear me use the term speed hill. That usually means it's fast, but it's small. But it's not like it's pretty drawn out, but you're going like really fast over it. Mm-hmm. So, top hat is basically you go through a vertical climb, and then it's like a U shape at the top, and then you go down a vertical drop. So it just kind of makes this big, long U shape, so to speak. The best example I can think of is like Skyrocket at Kennywood. That first launch, you go up and then just do this big U shape and go straight back down.
Yeah.
There's also inverted 0G rolls, which is the same thing, but you're upside down. So you go up and then go this way.
Right.
Go upside down into the vertical drop. Also wanted to talk about the difference between barrel roll, heartline roll, and 0G rolls, because we talk about that occasionally.
True. And I still think those... I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
So it's kind of hard to explain for if you're just listening. I'll do my best. Barrel roll is when the track spins around itself. So like the track is actually going like this. A heartline roll is the spin actually happens where the rider is. So the track kind of goes around like this. And that's actually where the term heartline comes from, is the line of spin is supposed to be like your heart, like the heart of the rider. So think about the difference is rather than the track spinning and the riders going around the track, whereas a heart line is like the track is spinning and around the riders are basically the middle point of the, like if you think of the axis of spin.
I'm lost.
I know, this is so hard to explain.
I'm very lost.
It's so hard to explain. So like if you think of like a circle and like the middle point is the, if you think of...
No, yeah, okay, I get that, but like I don't understand how the track spins.
So if the description I have isn't very good either, so I'm trying to think the best way to explain this. Like you think of a clock where the middle is the point that you're spinning around, right? You're still giving me
no, keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
So the middle point where like, the hands spin around the outside of the clock, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's a middle point that doesn't spin. Okay?
Okay.
For a barrel roll, the track is the middle point, and the riders spin as you're going through the barrel roll. The track stays in the middle, and the riders are the thing that's being spun around.
Okay.
Okay. A heartline roll, the riders are what's in the middle, and the track is spinning around the outside.
I'm gonna pretend. I get it. I think my biggest confusion is it's like, if maybe give me an example. Have I been on one?
It won't. I don't think that will help.
Okay.
So hardline rolls are generally considered to be superior because they're more comfortable. Barrel rolls have more laterals because the rider is what's actually, because both elements you go upside down, but the barrel roll you're really not moving except for going upside down, whereas the barrel roll you're being flung sideways to get turned upside down.
Oh, wait, so a heartline roll is you're not really turning upside down.
You're going upside down, but because your body is the center of gravity, like you're not moving a whole lot except for the fact that you're being flipped upside down. But in a barrel roll, the coaster is the center of gravity, so you're on the outside of the spin, if that makes sense. So there's more lateral force as well that's making you spin upside down.
Okay. It's starting to make sense. It's not.
Hopefully everybody listening, it makes sense. If not, Google it and look for a visual aid.
Sorry,
because I could pull up a visual aid for Haley to help her understand, but that's not going to help anybody listening. So, if you really want to know, you can go look it up.
Okay.
So then zero G roll. The only difference with zero G rolls is it basically combines a heartline roll with a airtime hill. Okay. So like the actual roll, you'll go up and spin and then keep spinning as you go back down. So they're basically combining the sensation of spinning with the sensation of airtime at the same time. So that seems like that's understandable, yes. Right? Okay. So some of the other things here, we've talked about chain lifts already. There's different types of launch systems on roller coasters. There's magnetic launch systems, which are pretty common nowadays. There's limb launches and LSM launches. We're not going to get into all the engineering technicals.
Why not?
Anything you want to know more about, you can Google, but I'm not getting into the weeds there.
Again, this is roller coasters.
This is a beginner's guide. Yeah, we're not. This is a beginner's guide as we spend 3 minutes trying to explain the difference between a barrel roll and a heartline roll.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's just might be more complicated than what was needed, which is fine. But hydraulic launches use hydraulic pressurized fluid to power their launches. And then some coasters have an air launch, which basically works the same way as a hydraulic launch, but it uses compressed air rather than compressed fluid. So, brake run. There's a lot of different brakes used on roller coasters. You'll hear us talk about the final brake run, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the final brakes that slow you down at the end of the ride.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see brakes in the middle of a ride. There can be trim brakes, which just slow you down. A lot of times it's just to kind of manage the speed of a coaster, make sure it's not going too fast. You'll also have mid-course brake runs, which is actually a section of track that could stop the train if necessary. Like if there was a train that got stuck ahead of you, the mid-course brake run can actually stop your train so that they don't crash into each other.
Yeah.
Those also allow for more trains to run on the track because they basically roller coasters are broken up into something called block sections, which are just different segments of track that are designed to each section can only have one train in it at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so once one train clears the section in front of it or clears the section, then the train behind it can move into that section. So that's the system that's used to prevent coaster trains from crashing into each other. So the more block sections you have, in theory, the more trains can operate. So Space Mountain has something like 16 block sections, like something stupid like that. So they can run a ton of those, little 6-person trains on that ride.
Yeah.
Where something like Phantom's Revenge, I think, only has 2 or probably 3 block sections. So it can only run 2 trains at a time. So that's kind of what that means. Transfer track, it's basically what allows them to add or remove trains from the track. It's a piece of track that is usually right next to the station and it can move back and forth. So that way they can take trains off the track so they can perform maintenance, or they can put more trains on the track too. When we're talking about the difference between trains and cars, car is a single unit within the train. So, a train is made up of individual cars. I'm trying to think of which one of these are necessary to talk about.
Probably restraints.
Yeah, restraints. There's a lot of different restraints. You hear us talk about lap bars. That's just what it sounds like. It's a bar that sits on your lap. Uh-huh. There's different kinds too. There's you might hear us talk about clamshell restraints, which is a type of lap bar that's on like B&M's Hypercoasters. Over the shoulder restraints is restraints that you pull up, like they're up above your head and you pull them over your head and over your shoulders.
Yep, usually there's like ones that are on your chest, and then there's ones that like are on your chest and like up by your head too. It just depends.
Yeah, the newer ones are referred to as vest restraints because they kind of fit on you just like if you were wearing a vest. You might also hear the term comfort collars, which is it's a type of over-the-shoulder restraint, but it's like 2 big, either rubber or plastic straps that come down, kind of this similar to a vest restraint, but not exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Anyways,
yeah,
we'll move on.
Okay, so some of the terms that we use as far as the experience when you're riding on a coaster. Obviously,
I would pay attention to this one because you use these a lot.
So obviously we talk about airtime a lot. I mean, heck, it's in the name of our podcast. That's just the sensation of leaving your seat when you experience negative G's when you're going up and over what is called an airtime hill. You'll also hear specifically 2 terms, either ejector airtime or floater airtime. Ejector airtime, they're both pretty self-explanatory, but ejector airtime is when you're getting like flung out of your seat. Like it's a pretty intense jolt of airtime. You'll see these a lot on pretty intense coasters, like a lot of RMC coasters. Mm-hmm. And Phantom's Revenge that we talked about earlier has a ton of ejector airtime.
That's true. That one's really intense.
Yeah. And then floater airtime is a lot more gentle. You'll see these on some of the bigger like hyper coasters where you just kind of gently float out of your seat. Both of them are like enthusiasts don't necessarily have some enthusiasts will have a preference. I'm just saying enthusiasts as a whole probably don't have a preference one over the other. Mm-hmm. They just both have different experiences.
Right.
So
I like the floater airtime better. I just feel like weightless. Like you said, I like that weightless feeling.
Floater airtime is also more comfortable.
Yes.
So like the GP generally enjoys floater airtime more. Yes. Where like there's some ejector airtime coasters where I'm like, it's like borderline painful.
Yeah, it's
but
like too
enthusiasts put up with it because they enjoy it so much.
Jackrabbit, I feel like, is...
Well, Jackrabbit definitely has some of both.
Yeah, but like some of the...
But like RMC coasters have like tons of ejector airtime.
Yeah.
So... G-forces, we talk about these a little bit. Positive, this is going back to physics class, but positive G's push you into your seat, negative G's lift you out of your seat, and lateral G's are side to side. So pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Hang time is when you're upside down, but so sometimes when you go through an inversion, you go through fast enough that the I can never remember which one of the forces it is. Basically, the force of you going through the element, if you go through fast enough, keeps you in your seat. Mm-hmm. But if it's slow enough, then you'll start to hang from your seat. Like you'll start to, gravity starts pulling you down, and you'll actually hang from your restraint. So that's what we refer to as hang time. So pacing is how well the ride maintains speed and energy throughout the layout. So generally speaking, enthusiasts like a ride that has good pacing. And we'll criticize rides that may have good pacing, but then like get too slow by the end, and so it kind of gets boring. Rattle and jackhammering are both very similar. It's just unwanted vibrations or roughness.
No one likes those.
So. Whip is a term that I've used before, and Haley was like, what are you talking about? Like, I referred to a ride as whippy before, and she was like, what are you saying?
Whenever you used whippy, I was like, what
is that?
What are you talking about?
So that's just a quick, snappy directional change, and happens a lot more at the back of the train than at the front of a train, but yeah. Head chopper is a near miss illusion with the track or scenery overhead. You'll get these a lot on wing coasters. They try to specifically design them to feel like these near miss elements where you feel like you're gonna hit your head on something, but it's obviously designed to be completely safe. And then the last one, head banging, which is just when this is another uncomfortable one. It's when your head is like the ride is so rough that your head is bouncing around on the restraints. It's really only an experience you'll have with over the shoulder restraints, not so much on lap bars or anything like that. So
okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Operational terms we talk about occasionally. We don't have a whole lot here. Dispatch is when the train leaves the station. Pretty straightforward. Talk about capacity, which is just how many riders per hour a coaster can handle. Station height requirement is pretty self-explanatory. Rollback is when a coaster fails to crest the top of a hill and rolls back down. Some coasters are designed to do that on purpose. So like a lot of these new coasters that have what's called swing launches have like a launch where it goes up and then it rolls back and then it goes into a backward spike.
Yeah.
And then it speeds it up again so that the third launch you make it up and over the airtime hill that you had the rollback on earlier. So that's kind of a newer trendy thing in some launch coasters nowadays. But there's also a thing called valleying, which is when a train gets stuck in a low section of the coaster and can't make it over the next hill.
You don't see it too often.
Don't see it too often, but it is not a good thing when that happens.
No, it's not.
So
these ones are funny.
Enthusiast terms. These are the funny ones. So
oh dear. If
you ever hear the term "thuzy," that's a term that we use that's just short for enthusiast. You're coaster thusies.
Such a dorky. So dorky.
You also hear enthusiasts talk about credits. This is a thing that's pretty popular amongst enthusiasts. And if you're looking at a coaster enthusiast social profile and you see CC, that means coaster count or credit count. And that's just how many coasters they've been on. That's what credit means, is how many unique coasters have you been on. It's not how many times you've been on a coaster. It's individual, like how many coasters you have been on. And it's a thing that gets debated a lot too, which I find really ridiculous and kind of funny to watch. But some people are very particular about what counts as a credit and what doesn't. So roller coasters specifically have to be gravity powered, is the kind of what enthusiasts have dubbed the official classification. So there's some roller coasters that are powered coasters that like gravity isn't involved at all. It's just it follows, it's being powered throughout the whole thing, whether by electricity or magnets or different things, or even like a motor.
Yeah.
And so even though it's on a track, some coaster enthusiasts don't count it because it's not gravity powered. But some enthusiasts are like, it's basically a roller coaster. It behaves the same way. Basically. So it's different. Enthusiasts are different about what credits they count and what credits they don't count. The only thing I'm particular about with my credit counting is that I count specific rides as credits, where some coaster enthusiasts, like there's some roller coasters that technically have two separate tracks. The best examples I can think of are Space Mountain at Walt Disney World, Lightning Racer at Hershey Park, Gemini at Cedar Point. Those are a few examples of coasters that are one attraction, but technically do have two separate coasters that don't connect at all. They just run to, like, they are either a dueling or racing coaster. Some coaster enthusiasts count those as 2 credits. I only count it as 1. I'm like, it's the same ride. Like, it's, yeah. I'm not particular enough. And some coaster enthusiasts are like, oh yeah, I like the red side more than the blue side.
I mean, but some of the racing coasters are 2 different tracks.
Some of them are different enough that I could tell you which one I have an opinion about. For example, like Stardust Racers, the new one that's opening at Universal Studios, they do have different experiences on each side. And so I could probably, someday when I get to ride it, I could probably tell you which side I prefer. But I'll still only count it as 1 credit because it's one ride. It's one attraction.
Okay.
So that's probably the only weird thing I do with my credit counting. You'll hear people use the term RMC'd as like a verb.
I mean, I use that.
Yeah, you use that. It's when a wooden coaster is renovated by the company RMC into a hybrid coaster. We'll talk about that later when we get to manufacturers. GP, we use that in every episode. It stands for the general public.
That's me.
So that is just casual visitors to the park that aren't roller coaster enthusiasts. And some coaster enthusiasts use it as a derogatory term, but most enthusiasts understand that the GP is really what pays the bills for the amusement park. So
that's right.
It's got to be nice to the GP.
That's right. Be nice to me.
Couple more here. Graying out or blacking out is when you lose vision or consciousness due to the extreme G-forces of a coaster.
Been there, done that.
I've grayed out a couple times, never blacked out. You've blacked out once. I think just once that you've blacked out on a coaster. So that was before we were even into the coaster enthusiast thing. So
unpleasant. Did not like that.
A Zen ride is when you're the only person on the entire train. That doesn't happen very often, but
that would have been wild.
I don't think I've ever had it happen before. I've been like one of 2 or 3 people.
I was gonna say we've gotten.
I don't think I've ever had a Zen ride before. And this last one here, stapled, is when the restraint is so tight that you don't even lift up out of your seat during airtime moments, and it can be kind of uncomfortable. Like, it's a term that enthusiasts use, like getting stapled into your seat. So. Okay. I'm sure I missed some. I tried to think of as many terms as I could. Trying to think of all the different things that we talk about as enthusiasts. But, okay, manufacturers. So I'm just going to kind of brief. Obviously, there's a whole lot of history. You could have a whole episode about each of these manufacturers, but we're just trying to give you a brief understanding of what each manufacturer is known for and a couple of coasters that are notable by them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So aerodynamics was really big in the 60s through the early 2000s, mostly because they invented tubular steel track for roller coasters, and they constructed the first roller coasters to have inversions. So they really broke all kinds of records in the coaster enthusiasts or in the coaster industry.
Right.
Prior to the 2000s, they were huge.
Yeah, they changed a lot of. Yeah.
So some of their notable coasters: X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain, Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland, and Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm. They did go out of business in the early 2000s, and so they are no longer around, but you'll still see their coasters at lots of parks. B&M, or Bolliger and Mabillard, is a Swiss company. They've been in the industry since the 90s. Well, before that, they started really becoming popular in the 90s. They're known for ultra smooth coasters, and they're known for a lot of rides. They're one of the most notable coaster manufacturers in the world. So they invented the inverted coaster and dive coasters. They perfected, a lot of people say, the flying coaster. High capacity, big coasters, very popular. So Fury 325 at Carowinds, Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa, Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America, just some of their more notable coasters. Chance Rides I'm combining this with D.H. Morgan too, because D.H. Morgan was a big coaster manufacturer in the 90s, and then Chance Rides ultimately bought them out. So they're kind of one of the same nowadays. So their big hyper coasters are popular at parks like Worlds of Fun and Valley Fair and Dorney Park. They also constructed Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spa Land, which right now is the tallest and longest coaster in the world. Sorry, not tallest. It was the tallest, still is the longest coaster in the world. And then Chance Rides built Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom, which is a very popular coaster here in the States. We then have CCI, which stands for Custom Coasters International. They were basically the driving force of wooden coasters coming back in the 90s. Specialized in out-of-control, airtime heavy wooden coasters. They were quite different from the wooden coasters of the days gone by. But they did go out of business in the early 2000s, and so a lot of their coasters nowadays are starting to be RMC'd. Some of their coasters that are still standing, the Raven at Holiday World, Shivering Timbers at Michigan's Adventure, and Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. Next, we have Gerstlauer, which is a German company that's known for thrill coasters that are also compact. Like, they're pretty good at like packing a lot of thrill into a small coaster. They've also really brought to the industry coasters that have beyond vertical drops. There's other coaster manufacturers that are doing that nowadays, but they're really the ones that kind of popularized coasters that could actually go beyond 90 degrees. And they still hold the record. Gerstlauer has two big records. They hold the record for the coaster with the most inversions in the world, which is the Smiler at it's at Alton Towers, has 14 inversions.
Oh, thank you.
I actually don't think you mentioned this earlier. Inversions, that's another term I should have mentioned. That's just when a coaster goes upside down. So they also built a Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm, and then the steepest coaster in the world, which is TMNT Shellraiser at Nickelodeon Universe in New Jersey. At the drop on that one is 121.5 degrees.
That's
so
crazy.
It's pretty wild. Next up, we have the Gravity Group, which is another wooden coaster manufacturer. Most of their coasters nowadays are family models. They specialize in family wooden coasters, but they're also responsible for one of the biggest and craziest roller coasters ever constructed, which is the Voyage at Holiday World, which is considered by lots of people to be the best wooden coaster in the world. So GCI, or Great Coasters International, was formed from the remnants of CCI, which we talked about earlier. In Great Coasters International, GCI is still in business today. It's probably the most notable wooden coaster manufacturer nowadays. And they're still building wooden coasters every now and then when parks will give them the chance. So I wish they would get more work, because they do build really great rides.
Yeah.
Two of their most notable that have opened in not in the last 20 years, I guess. Mystic Timbers at Kings Island, and then Thunderhead at Dollywood are some of coaster enthusiasts' favorite GCI coasters. Mm-hmm. Intamin is a huge manufacturer that we talk a lot about. Intamin, when Aerodynamics went out of business, Intamin's the one that stepped up to the plate to be the coaster manufacturer that was pushing boundaries and breaking records.
Yeah, they still are.
And still are making incredible coasters. So Intamin broke the 300-foot barrier when they opened Millennium Force in 2000. And then they broke the 400-foot barrier when they opened Top Thrill Dragster in 2003. So, and then Intamin is currently constructing Falcon's Flight, which is going to be the first 600-foot coaster ever constructed. Like, Intamin is just always pushing the boundaries at the expense of some reliability, because Intamin has opened some coasters that have had a lot of issues, but it's kind of risk and reward, so to speak. Yep. So some of their other notable coasters include Pantherian at King's Dominion, the once tallest coaster in the world, King de Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure, one of the best coasters in the world, according to enthusiast, Velocicoaster at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. And then another runner-up, probably, for best wooden coaster in the world, because they do both, El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure is also by Intamin. Next, we have Mack Rides, which is kind of an up-and-coming manufacturer, but is really doing some impressive stuff. Probably... Most people would say Mack Rides probably opened the best new roller coaster of 2024, being Voltron, that opened at Europa Park in Germany. And they're just doing some really, really cool stuff with their models and some really interesting things with their layouts. They also opened the very famous Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City, which is the world's first extreme spinning coaster, which is a spinning coaster that goes upside down. So, so very, very unique rides for Mack Rides, and they're pushing the boundaries for sure. It was
spelled that right way.
Yeah, because it's a German company, you would think like Mach, like MACH is what you would think, like Mach, like when you like. Yeah.
The way you pronounce it, though, it sounds like Mack Rides.
Exactly. Like, yeah. So, but it is. That is how it's pronounced, and they are German. But it's for some reason it's MACK. I don't know why. So, Maurer is a coaster company we don't talk a lot about. They do mostly family coasters. Their spinning coasters are probably their most notable rides. They also did Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Florida, which will be torn out fairly soon here. So probably their most notable coaster is going to be gone in the pretty soon. Yeah,
sorry, did I say that?
That's the one that Haley blacked out on.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
PTC, or Philadelphia Toboggan Company, is a company that's, I think, is still technically in business, but they're not making coasters anymore. They were basically responsible for all of the wooden coasters that were being constructed. Well, not all. A lot of the wooden coasters that were being constructed in like the 1900s through like the 1970s. They are still in business nowadays, I think, because they still are providing trains for some of those old wooden coasters that need them, but they're not building new coasters anymore.
Got it.
So some of their most notable additions are Phoenix at Knoebels, which another runner for best wooden coaster in the world, and then the Racer at Kings Island, which we'll talk about a little bit later in our history. Premier Rides is famous for their launch coasters. That's pretty much exclusively what they do, is pretty much they only do launch coasters. They've had issues, but they also are still, pushing the limits on different things. They're opening a coaster this year at Canada's Wonderland that a lot of people could be one of the top 2 or 3 coasters to open this year. That's an Alpenfury that's opening later this year. So they also are responsible for Revenge of the Mummy at the Universal Parks and Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain. They also opened they're the ones that built Skyrocket at Kennywood.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. RMC is probably the most popular manufacturer right now, I would say, between them and Intamin. It depends who you ask. But they revolutionized coaster design in 2011 when they decided that they could take an old wooden coaster and convert it into a steel coaster. Essentially what they do is they take the wooden track off of the wooden support structure and then put steel track in its place, but this new steel track can be capable of more intense airtime moments and inversions. They can do all kinds of outrageous things with this steel track, but at a fraction of the cost of other steel coasters because they're utilizing the old support structure from the wooden coaster that used to stand there.
Right.
So a huge revolution for the amusement industry. 2011 is when they started, and they just blew up in the 2010s. Slowed down a little bit lately, mostly because a lot of the parks that had a wooden coaster they wanted to revitalize have already done so now.
Right.
So you're not seeing RMC get as much work nowadays as they used to. They also made the single rail coaster popular when they opened their first one at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. And now some other companies are starting to copy that design as well. So RMC definitely pushing the bounds of what's possible for roller coasters.
Yep.
And they're also responsible for what many people consider to be the best roller coaster in the world, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Yep. And then they also were responsible for our very own Outlaw Run here at Silver Dollar City, which is still the wooden coaster with the most inversions in the world. So very cool stuff from RMC.
RMC. They're my favorite, but that's not a shock.
S&S is best known for some of their flat rides. They're responsible for a lot of the launched tower rides that you see, and also the giant, they're called Screamin' Swings. Like the barn swing at Silver Dollar City, and they're opening at, Twisted Twizzler at Hershey Park this year.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But they also build roller coasters, and generally speaking, their roller coasters all use air launches just the same way that their flat rides do. So they are responsible for our very own powder keg here at Silver Dollar City. They also were responsible for is now closed, but the previously fastest accelerating roller coaster in the world, Dodonpa at Fuji-Q Highland in Japan. But when that one closed, they still have the record for the fastest accelerating coaster in the world, which is Max Force at Six Flags Great America. And then they were also responsible for the inversion machine that is Steel Curtain at Kennywood. So they're kind of doing all kinds of crazy stuff at S&S. So.
Yeah.
Next, we have Schwarzkopf, which is a company that was really breaking the bounds of what you could do with roller coasters in the 70s and 80s. And a lot of enthusiasts still love the rides, including me. They were basically started as a company building roller coasters for like carnivals and traveling fairs, but then kind of moved into the actual amusement park space with like these really compact looping coasters. And they became really big in the 70s and 80s. And also them, along with Aerodynamics, invented, so to speak, the launch coaster. And so there's some debate on who was first, whether it was Aerodynamics or Schwarzkopf, but both of them definitely were pushing the bounds. And Schwarzkopf, not as much as Aerodynamics, but the two of them were definitely big competitors of each other in the 70s and 80s, which helped push the industry forward. Togo is one we'll just talk about briefly because they don't do business in the States anymore.
I've never even
and
heard
everything
of them.
they opened in the States, people really disliked. they were very janky and they really struggled in the States for some reason and got sued by Knott's Berry Farm at one point.
What?
Yeah, it's really bad. But so they don't work in the States anymore, but there is one coaster in Las Vegas, the Big Apple coaster, which also people don't like, but still a company that is talked about every now and then on our show. Vekoma is one that's become really big lately. They invented the very famous Vekoma Boomerang coaster, which you can see at dozens and dozens of amusement parks across the world. It's a very famous coaster model, but they kind of got a reputation of being pretty rough. But in recent years, they've reinvented themselves, and their new coasters are really smooth. They also are the #1 manufacturer for Disney's roller coasters. Disney turns to Vekoma a lot for some of their stuff. So you'll see Vekoma, some of their most notable Disney coasters include Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot and Tron Light Cycle Run at Magic Kingdom. They're also opening the very first tilt coaster in the United States, Siren's Curse, at Cedar Point this summer. And then they're also getting a lot of work. Sorry, that's our dog here trying to make himself comfortable. They're also getting a lot of work in the family coaster space with coasters like at Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood that just opened a couple years ago.
Every time you mention it, that song comes
think about
in my head.
that Dolly Parton song.
Yes, Big Bear Mountain.
And then their family boomerang models are getting a lot of work right now, like Good Gravy that just opened at Holiday World. And then just a couple weeks ago, they opened their super boomerang model, Vertical Velocity, at Six Flags Great Adventure. So Vekoma is just blowing up right now. So they've been big in Europe for a long time, and so they're finally just starting to get some traction in the States, which I think is really good for the industry. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Two more here. Zamperla is one that we don't talk about a lot because they're mostly family coasters and flat rides, but this past year, Cedar Point gave them their big opportunity when they tapped Zamperla to redo Top Thrill Dragster into Top Thrill 2. And it was a big flop. So now, to be fair, Top Thrill 2 is supposed to open, as we're recording this, it's probably supposed to open in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And supposedly all the issues are worked out. So Zamperla still could have their chance to make themselves a big player in the industry. But
I hope so.
that remains to be seen. So
Yeah.
and then,
TBD.
And then the last one here, we have Zero, which is another family coaster, flat ride manufacturer. Their most notable coaster is probably Verbolten at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, which surprisingly good coaster that we got to try out this past year. And kind of makes me wonder why Zero hasn't done more stuff like that, but was a very good ride.
Oh,
okay.
Woof, take a breath.
Yeah, this episode is turning out to be longer than I anticipated, so hopefully some people are still sticking around. But, if you get bored, then you can just skip ahead to the next section.
And maybe, what you could do, too, is... put on the section this is
when this section starts or whatever. That's a good point. If you want to so that's probably what I'll do. If you go down to the description, I'll put timestamps for when different sections start. So that way you can I kind of don't really care about the terms. I just want to know more about the manufacturers. Then you can see when that starts.
That's a good idea.
That's probably what I'll do.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, good.
Such a smart
I know, good idea from Haley there. So.
Sorry, I'm such a dork.
You're fine. Okay, amusement parks and chains. There's really 6 major amusement park chains that we'll talk about here. So we have the Walt Disney Parks.
Yes.
Universal Parks and Resorts. Six Flags, which now includes Cedar Fair. United Parks and Resorts. Hirsch and Family Entertainment, and Merlin Entertainments. Those are kind of the big ones we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Now, there's probably others that are outside of the states that I'm not as familiar with, but these are kind of the ones that impact our realm, so to speak. So, Walt Disney, I don't need to talk about the Disney parks. Everybody knows the Disney parks. It's the most well-known and highest attended theme parks in the world, and largely considered by the GP as the pinnacle of the amusement industry. Coaster enthusiasts might say otherwise, though. Just because, and that's because Disney's really focused on families. And so, their coasters are not really breaking the bounds of, some of the other manufacturers or some of the other chains. Now, I will say some of their newer stuff has caught the attention of some enthusiasts, Cosmic Rewind. That thing's crazy, that, and then Light Cycle Run, it's top 100. So Disney's got some that have caught the attention of enthusiasts, but not as much as some others. So Disney has resorts in Florida, California, Paris, Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong. If you're anybody that knows anything about amusement parks, you know about Disney. So
yeah, don't live under a rock.
Yes. So now Disney's number one competitor, and really only one of 2 worldwide heavyweights in the amusement industry, would be Universal. And they are having massive growth right now. And honestly, might be making Disney a little bit nervous. You won't hear them say that, but if I was working for Disney, I might be a little nervous.
I will admit that, they should Universal is giving them a run for their money.
Yeah. Universal is about to open a brand new park in about a month, and their coasters are like top notch.
Yeah.
So most coaster, or like we already talked about Velocicoaster at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure, but also Stardust Racers, which I've heard some enthusiasts have had a chance to try that one out. I've heard that one could be making a run for being even better than Velocicoaster. So,
crazy.
Yeah, there's some really good coaster things happening in the Universal space, but also for dark rides and flat rides too. Not so much flat rides, but dark rides too. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and the theming at the new park, like Universal's just doing a lot of cool stuff right now, and just announced a new park coming to the UK. So like, a few weeks ago they just announced that.
That's cool. I'm kind of hopeful that Disney, like they teased at so many new things happening at Disney that I hope that Disney will like not retaliate, but like come back,
respond.
Yes,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's the hope. So
that would be
competition
awesome.
is good for the industry for sure.
It's true. It is true.
So Universal has resorts in Florida, California, Japan, and like I said, one coming to the UK, as well as some family parks that they're working on in Texas, and I don't remember the other ones coming, but they're working on some smaller resorts too. Six Flags / Cedar Fair. So Cedar Fair Six Flags and Cedar Fair were the two largest regional park chains in the U.S.
Yep.
And Six Flags has been a household name for a long time, while Cedar Fair is kind of lesser known amongst the GP. Well, last year the two of them merged into a giant conglomerate of parks.
So crazy that
it's still crazy that happened, but so they are now by far the largest amusement park chain of regional parks in the United States, of any parks in the United States, honestly. So this is just some of their most notable parks, but they have like 20 something amusement parks, not to mention the water parks. So some of their bigger ones are Cedar Point, Kings Island, Carowinds, and Knott's Berry Farm on the Cedar Fair side. And then Six Flags Magic Mountain, Six Flags Great America, and Six Flags Great Adventure on the Six Flags side. So, we talk a lot about these parks, mostly because we've done a lot of the Cedar Fair parks. Six Flags, we still need to get to some of the Six Flags parks, but those are now part of the same company, so which is still strange. United Parks and Resorts. This was formerly known as SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. So I bet you can guess which parks they own. They own the 3 SeaWorld parks, one in Florida, one in Texas, and one in California. Mm-hmm. But they also own the Busch Gardens parks, one in Virginia and one in Tampa Bay in Florida. So those 5 parks are like their 5 big parks. And then they also own the Sesame Place parks, which there is one in Pennsylvania, one in California, if I remember correctly. So
I wouldn't know. But I know that there is one in Pennsylvania.
The Pennsylvania one I know for sure. I'm just trying to... I think the other one's in Cali. Hershend Family Entertainment is one that pretty much nobody outside of the amusement industry knows of. They probably know the parks, but not necessarily the company that owns them. Up until just a few weeks ago, this privately owned chain was pretty small. Really was just Silver Dollar City and Dollywood, and then a couple other smaller parks. But they just recently purchased all of Palace Entertainment's parks and more than doubled their portfolio size. So crazy. Yeah, so now they own more parks than United Parks, I think. So some of their most notable parks now, Silver Dollar City, Dollywood, Kennywood, and Kentucky Kingdom are just some of their big ones now. Then Merlin Entertainments is one we don't talk about a lot on the podcast because a lot of what they do is in the UK. They're most notably the owners of Alton Towers and Thorpe Park, which are probably the 2 best UK parks. You could also make an argument for Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but I think most enthusiasts would agree Alton Towers and Thorpe Park are the best parks in the UK. But they also own the Legoland parks, which are here in the States. So they do have an impact in that sense here across the pond. So they do have a little bit of ownership over here as well. Now, the only other parks to talk about there are some parks that are completely independent, not owned by a specific chain. They just run things themselves, and that can be good or bad depending on the park. For the ones we're going to talk about, I think it's great because they're some of my favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, Hershey Park is probably the biggest one
Right.
that's independently owned, and it is a fantastic park.
It's huge.
Holiday World is also a coaster enthusiast's favorite. Like, they only have 6 coasters, but 4 of the 6 are in the top 100 in the country. So, like, they're very much quality over quantity with their roller coasters at Holiday World. Just a great operationally run park too.
Yeah.
Free parking and free soft drinks, like, that's just crazy. Like,
it's still unheard of. Like, you don't see that anywhere else.
Yeah.
So anything.
I know. So you also have Knoebels in Pennsylvania, which is a small park that still doesn't charge admission. It just charges you by ride. So that's kind of a unique thing that not a lot of parks doing. And then Lagoon out in Utah is another privately owned one that a lot of enthusiasts enjoy their coasters. And Lagoon doesn't even work with coaster manufacturers anymore. Now they just manufacture their own coasters. So if you want to talk independent, that's independent. Like, we're going to do everything on our own.
Yeah.
So
don't worry, we got this.
Yeah. So independent can be a bad thing depending on the park, obviously, depending on how well it's run. But there definitely are some really, really great independent parks in the country too. Okay, so we've talked about everything now. So if you really, really want to know a full history, not a full history, obviously, but some of the kind of the major things that have happened in the industry over time, I'm just going to run through these. I'm going to try to not just read this verbatim, try to make this as interesting as possible. So
I got this. I'll read it.
So, like I said earlier, we're in the U.S., so this is a lot of American coaster history, but there's a couple things outside. So full abbreviated history.
I was going to say, this is
not a full history. We could write a whole book about that, several books. Full abbreviated history of the amusement industry and roller coasters in particular. So, Riding Mountain was built in Russia in the 1750s, featured slides that could be covered with ice in the winter, but had cars with wheels in the summer. So that's kind of the very beginnings of roller coasters. Led to scenic railways in the 1850s, which most of those were designed for like industrial purposes, but then when there wasn't enough work going on, they would sell tickets for people to ride them for fun.
All right.
And so then that kind of led to parks building them specifically for fun. And so some of your oldest operating amusement parks opened in this time frame, like Lake Compounce, Cedar Point, Riverside Amusement Park, Dorney Park, Lagoon. Those all opened in like the 1840s to 1880s. So really old parks. Mm-hmm. The oldest operating coaster is Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park in Pennsylvania that opened in 1902. Operating coaster is a loose term because it is technically not operating right now. It is operational, I should say. Like, it could.
It's not open?
It's not open right now, unfortunately. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, park's just not making enough money right now to keep it open, but it is not, they're not like tearing it down or anything like that. It's just not, you can't go ride it right now. So we'll see what happens. So then there's an event, or not an event, but like a time frame we talk about in the amusement industry called the first golden age of roller coasters. Basically from 1914 through 1929, post World War I. It's basically happening during the Roaring 20s is essentially the best way to look at it. So, a lot of coasters opening during this time frame, such as like Jackrabbit at Kennywood, which opened during that time frame, and I think the Racer at Kennywood opened during that time frame. Roller Coaster at Lagoon is another coaster that opened. So a lot of coasters opening, a lot of parks opening. People are looking to spend their money now that the war is over, right?
Right.
Well, then the Great Depression hits in 1929 and basically just brings amusement industry to a screeching halt. And then we get out of the Depression, but we go straight into World War II. So basically up until like 1945, at the end of World War II, there's just like nothing happening in the amusement industry. So then finally, 10 years after World War II, Disneyland opens in California in 1955, which kind of sparks a new generation of theme parks and roller coasters. There's some that opened before then, like Knott's opened in 1940, Holiday World in 1946. But really, there's like this huge wave of parks that open after Disneyland. So you get parks like Michigan's Adventure and Busch Gardens Tampa, Silver Dollar City, Six Flags Over Texas, Dollywood, SeaWorld San Diego, Universal Studios Hollywood, Six Flags Over Georgia, just tons of parks opening in the late 50s and 60s.
Right.
Same time period, 1959, Matterhorn bobsleds opens at Disneyland. It was the very first tubular steel coaster in the world, which basically means that the rails on the coaster were tubes, which allowed you to have wheels on the top and the bottom.
Right.
Whereas other steel coasters, it just like sat on top of steel tracks, so it wasn't exactly the same thing. So this opened up a whole new world for steel coasters, and so Matterhorn bobsleds is considered a historic coaster in the amusement industry for sure. 1971, Disney World opens in Florida, which again, the opening of these Disney parks really just opens the door for other people to start opening their parks, as people are seeing like, whoa, like these are really cool. These are really cool things that we can do with these amusement parks. So Kings Island opens in 72, followed by Carowinds, Worlds of Fun, SeaWorld Orlando, Six Flags Great Adventure, Kings Dominion, Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Six Flags Great America. All these parks opening in the 70s directly after Disney World opens. Really, I guess I don't even know, did they call it Disney World at that point, or did they just call it Magic Kingdom? I don't actually know that. Did they call it Disney World, or was it just Magic Kingdom until they opened Epcot in the 80s? I don't actually know.
I actually don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why I've never thought of that before.
No, I'm curious.
Yeah, interesting. So obviously this new wave of amusement parks brings with it new roller coasters. One of the most influential coasters of this time frame was the Racer at Kings Island. This racing wooden coaster opened in 1972 with the park, but really became famous when it was featured in an episode of The Brady Bunch in 1973. And so because of how big television was at this time frame, people seeing a roller coaster on television just opened the door for people to be interested in roller coasters in the amusement industry. And so a lot of amusement park historians point to this event as the beginning of what's known as the roller coaster renaissance, which, coaster innovation just went crazy and parks were opening coasters all over the place. Just a few years later, in 75, Knott's Berry Farm opens Corkscrew, built by Aerodynamics, which also did Matterhorn bobsleds, which we talked about earlier. This was the first modern roller coaster to go upside down. And so that opens a whole new avenue of roller coasters. Like we're now able to get these things go upside down. That's crazy.
Yeah.
1977, the very first launch coasters open. Again, Aerodynamics and Schwarzkopf. We're not sure which one really got it first, but both of them opened launch coasters. There were 6 of them that opened just that year. So launch coasters all of a sudden are opening all over the place. In 1979, the Beast opens at Kings Island, which is still the longest roller coaster in North America to this day. Like that's just it's for them to build that in 79 and still is the longest coaster in the country.
Do you think anybody
crazy.
will try and challenge that?
It's got to happen someday, but I don't know. It's just so much longer than anything else. So
I found the answer, by the way.
Okay, what's the answer on the Disney World thing?
So when Walt Disney World initially opened on October 1st, 1971, the resort was named Walt Disney World, and its first theme park was called
Magic Kingdom.
Actually, it was called Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, and then they shortened it to
just
Magic Kingdom.
I guess that makes sense. So they probably anticipated that they were going to add hotels and future parks, and so they named the whole resort Walt Disney World, and then the park was Magic Kingdom. Okay, there you go.
There you go. Curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity completed.
Well, it's usually killed the cat, but I don't think that's what we were going for.
No. That was seriously, I don't know.
Your curiosity got the best of you? Is that what you're going for? I don't know what phrase you're going for.
I don't know. Not Okay, moving on.
1985, Hershend, which had previously been operating two Silver Dollar City parks, one in Branson, Missouri, and one in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Well, Hershend strikes a deal with Dolly Parton to turn their Pigeon Forge location into Dollywood. Dollywood has obviously become a very popular amusement park in the country. So this is kind of the very beginnings of that. Throughout the 70s and 80s, parks would continue to one-up each other in the inversions category. So it was 2 inversions in 75, and by the time we get to 1987, we're all the way up to 6 inversions. All of these coasters with inversions being built by Aerodynamics, by the way. Schwarzkopf also had coasters with inversions, but never had the inversion record like Aerodynamics did. So this leads us to the next major event, which I touched on earlier. This is called the Coaster Wars. And amusement park historians generally point to the opening of Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point in 1989 as the catalyst for this time period. So that was, again, Aerodynamics built this coaster. So as you're seeing, Aerodynamics continues to be this record-breaking coaster manufacturer during this time. So Magnum was the first roller coaster to exceed 200 feet in height. And so when that happens, and people see, a lot of people in the amusement industry see how much that did for Cedar Point and really opened the door for Cedar Point to be the roller coaster park that it is today. But a lot of these other parks in the area really wanted, not even in the area, but really throughout the world, saw the value in being able to say, we opened the tallest or fastest roller coaster in the world. And so it really starts when in 1991, Kennywood, which is just a few hours away from Cedar Point, opened Steel Phantom, which then became the fastest coaster in the world. Again, another Aerodynamics coaster. 1994, Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the UK opens the Big One, which became the tallest coaster in the world. Again, Aerodynamics. 1996, Fuji Q Highland opens Fujiyama, which became the tallest and fastest coaster in the world, constructed by Togo. 1997, Six Flags Magic Mountain opens Superman the Escape, which became the fastest and technically tallest coaster in the world, but it was not a full circuit coaster. It was a shuttle coaster. I guess we never talked about what that means. Shuttle coaster just means it's not a closed circuit. It goes, forwards and then backwards, or backwards and then forwards, etc. Full circuit, it means it's a complete, complete loop.
Connected.
Yes. Yeah. So records generally are considered more legitimate for full circuit coasters, just because it actually traverses the whole layout. So then 2000, Cedar Point opens the first coaster to exceed 300 feet in height with the opening of Millennium Force, the new tallest coaster in the world, constructed by or manufactured by Intamin. So this is kind of that time for where Intamin steps into that space that because Aerodynamics is struggling at this point. In the next few years, you'll see Aerodynamics go bankrupt, and Intamin, kind of takes over as, the new groundbreaking coaster manufacturer. Later in 2000, Nagashima Spaland opens Steel Dragon 2000, which becomes the tallest and longest coaster in the world. Still is the longest coaster in the world to this day, actually.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yep. So opened by Morgan, D.H. Morgan at the time. 2001, Fuji Q Highland opens Dodonpa, which became the fastest coaster in the world, manufactured by SNS. So other manufacturers continuing to get in on this game now. 2003, Top Thrill Dragster opens at Cedar Point, becomes the first coaster to exceed 400 feet in height. Again, manufactured by Intamin, and it was the tallest and fastest coaster at the time.
Yeah,
and then
people just can't stop.
just couldn't get enough. Then 2005, Six Flags Great Adventure opens King Ka, becoming the tallest at 456 feet and the fastest at 128 miles per hour. Again, constructed by Intamin. So to recap, in the span of 16 years from 1989 to 2005, coasters went from 200 feet tall and 72 miles per hour to 456 feet tall and 128 miles per hour. More than double in just the span of 16 years.
Insane.
So eventually the parks figure out this is not sustainable. We just cannot keep opening coasters like this. And really what happens is in 2007, Cedar Point opens Maverick, which is largely considered one of the best roller coasters in the world, especially back when it opened. But it doesn't really break any records. It was only like 90 feet tall. It went, I think, top speed of 80 miles. I think it's 80 miles per hour top speed. Didn't break any records, but it just had a great layout and people loved it. And it was considered better than Millennium Force and Top Thrill Dragster, which had just opened smashing records. Maverick didn't break any records, but was considered better.
Right.
And so that's when Parks finally backed off and kind of said, okay, maybe we can make better stuff that doesn't necessarily have to break records. And so that's kind of when the coaster wars end. Like, we finally stopped trying to one-up each other. And now we're just building rides that we think will do really well in the park.
But like, that doesn't mean that there's still people that push the boundaries.
Oh yeah, and you still will see parks that will build record-breaking coasters, but rather than trying to build like the tallest and fastest period, you might see like, oh, well, we're building the tallest and fastest wing coaster, or we're opening the tallest and fastest hyper coaster, or we're building the fastest launch coaster to have this many inversions. Like, you know, they found ways to still make the coasters marketable without having to break the bank, so to speak.
Right.
And so King de Cost stood as the tallest coaster until it was torn down just last year. And now the tallest coaster is Top Thrill 2, which was Top Thrill Dragster. So even
sorry,
it should be fine now. But so you can see from 2003 to now, there has been nothing that has been built to, you know, surpass the height that we got to, you know, over 20 years ago.
Right.
So now on the speed side of things, there was one other coaster that opened in 2010, Formula Rosa, that opened in Abu Dhabi, that went up to 149 miles per hour, which is just insane. That is currently the fastest roller coaster in the world.
Don't you have to wear like special glasses?
Yes, you're remembering correctly. You have to wear goggles to wear that because it's out in the desert and they don't want you to lose an eye in the sand. It's pretty wild.
Much.
So
it's just too much.
Take a guess who built that. Intamin, yes. Intamin always with these record-breaking coasters. So
crazy.
So during this, so talk a little bit more about the actual parks now and kind of what's happening with the parks during this time frame. Six Flags began its rise to national fame during this time frame. Now, Six Flags was founded in 1961, but they first started to purchase other parks in 1984. And then in 1998 is really when they became like a household name, is when they purchased. There was a chain by the name of Premier Parks that owned a lot of parks around the country, and they purchased all of those parks for $1.86 billion in 1998. So then Six Flags became the largest chain in the country at that point. Now, Cedar Fair was also making some moves in the 90s. The chain was originally formed between two parks, Cedar Point and Valley Fair, hence the name Cedar Fair. Mm-hmm. But they would buy their third park in 1992, which was Dorney Park. And then they bought Worlds of Fun in 1995. And then one of the biggest acquisitions in the amusement industry, even to this day, was when Cedar Fair bought Knott's Berry Farm in 1997. Disney had tried to buy Knott's Berry Farm prior to that, but the Knott family was worried that the Disney IPs would completely overshadow everything that their family had worked to build for the last 50 years. And so they ultimately decided to sell it to Cedar Fair because they felt like Cedar Fair would keep the park true to its identity. And they have. So yeah. I think that was a wise decision there. Some other notable events that happened in this time frame. The first inverted coaster opens in 1992. That's Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America, which was B&M's kind of claim to fame in the coaster community. The first limb launch coaster in 1996, which was Flight of Fear at Kings Island and Kings Dominion, which was Premier Ride's big kind of first big roller coaster that kind of made them famous. The first air compressor launch coaster opened in 2001. That's Hypersonic XLC at Kings Dominion by S&S. And then the first hydraulic launch coaster in 2002, which was Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm, manufactured by, once again, Intamin.
Good old Intamin.
Wooden coasters started making a comeback in the 90s as well, with the founding of companies like CCI and GCI. So you get coasters like Raven at Holiday World, Wildcat at Hershey Park, Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm, Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. The first floorless coaster opens in 1999, which is Medusa at Six Flags Great Adventure. That was another B&M coaster. And then the inversion record was all the way up to 10 by this point, which was a Colossus at Thorpe Park. Again, Intamin. 2006 is an event that we talk about a lot on the show. And this event is kind of what inspired me to actually record this episode, because we talk about it so much. Just something it'd be helpful for people to know. Cedar Fair purchases the Paramount parks. These 5 parks included Kings Island, Kings Dominion, Carowinds, Canada's Wonderland, and California's Great America. They were owned by Paramount, obviously,
right.
The Paramount that we all know from, the media industry. But they were looking to get out of the amusement industry and sold their parks to Cedar Fair for $1.24 billion. So that more than doubled Cedar Fair's portfolio at that point in time. In 2009, just a few years later, SeaWorld buys the Busch Gardens Park from Anheuser-Busch. So kind of a similar story that Anheuser-Busch was like, let's get out of the amusement industry, kind of focus more on beer, like we're known for. So they still lease the Busch Gardens name to SeaWorld parks to this day. So that's the same year that Six Flags actually filed for bankruptcy, which ended in the closing of some parks, most notably Kentucky Kingdom, which then eventually ended up in Herschen's hands nowadays. 2011 is when RMC hits the scene when they open New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas, making it the very first wood-to-steel hybrid conversion coaster to ever open. RMC continues by opening Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City in 2013 as the first wooden coaster with multiple inversions, and still holds the record for the most inversions on a wooden coaster.
So cool.
RMC continued by opening Lightning Rod at Dollywood in 2016, which was the very first launched wooden coaster in the world. Unfortunately, is not still a launched coaster, but
so bitter.
It was a big deal at the time, and it's still considered a top 10 coaster in the country.
It's one that I was pregnant, and so I couldn't ride this one.
Unfortunately, so.
All right, we'll go back.
Yeah, we need to go back. RMC continued by opening Wonder Woman Golden Lasso at Six Flags Fiesta Texas in 2018, which was the world's first single rail roller coaster. So whereas most roller coasters have one rail on each side and 2 sets of wheels, this coaster is just one rail. Right. And so, it's very, very different looking from other coasters. The same year, Cedar Point opened Steel Vengeance, another RMC coaster, which is largely considered the best roller coaster of all time.
RMC is just killing it.
Yeah, really. That same year, Time Traveler opens at Silver Dollar City, the first inverting spinning coaster ever opened. 2021, Herschend makes its first large-scale acquisition when they purchase Kentucky Kingdom, the park that previously was closed by Six Flags, as we mentioned earlier. 2022 Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind opens as the first couple things. The first Omni coaster, which is like a controlled spinning coaster, kind of similar to drifting, so to speak, but also goes backwards, opens as the most expensive coaster ever at $500 million. It's a stupid amount of money.
Insane. I mean, it is worth it because
it's a great ride. It's so much fun. So
it's not even just like I'm curious, is that including the pre-show too?
I'm sure I'm sure that's included in the whole attraction.
That thing is crazy.
It must be. It's the whole attraction as a whole, I'm sure. So 2023, Six Flags and Cedar Fair announced intentions to merge the two companies in one of the most notable events in amusement park history. Cedar Fair had received purchase proposals by Six Flags and United Parks in the years prior, but ultimately I think they were less interested in just selling the company off, but wanted to merge with the company to so that way they could still keep control over their parks. So this merger was ultimately more in their interest, and the deal was finalized in the summer of 2024. So still crazy that happened, but it's official now. So Cedar Fair is technically no more. So if you hear people talk about legacy Six Flags parks or legacy Cedar Fair parks, that's generally just referring to which park that chain came from. Because now they're part of the same chain, but you can still see the differences because all the original Six Flags parks still have Six Flags in the name, and vice versa for the Cedar Fair park. So 2025, just a few weeks ago, we talked about this earlier in the show, but Herschend purchases all of Palace Entertainment's U.S. parks, more than doubling their current portfolio. It's probably the most notable acquisition to happen other than the merger, which isn't technically an acquisition, it's a merger. So this is probably the most notable acquisition since the 2009 acquisition of the Busch Gardens parks by SeaWorld. So it's a big deal. That hasn't something like this hasn't happened in a long time. And then still to come, but notable enough to include it in the history because it is coming this year. Falcon's Flight is set to open as the longest, tallest, and fastest roller coaster ever built when it opens later this year at over 600 feet tall.
No.
So.
No. GP says absolutely not.
And that is your beginner's guide to roller coasters and the coaster enthusiast community. Right. So
everybody go to bed.
Yeah, this was a long haul for sure, and appreciate you for sticking around if you stuck around for the whole episode. And this went a lot longer than I anticipated, but
it's good information.
It is good information to have.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's been a long recording episode. So so appreciate all of you that tuned in, and like I said, we'll put together like a PDF version of this. So like if you are better at like reading through, or even if you just want to refer back to that, you're like, okay, wait, when did the Paramount parks get purchased again? Like rather than have to find it somewhere in this episode, it's probably going to be a lot easier to find like on a PDF file or something.
And you even talked about having like the
and there'll be timestamps too. So like if you want to refer back later, and so. But hopefully that should give you, like, if you're new to this hobby and you wanted to learn, now you know everything you need to know to be a roller coaster enthusiast.
Literally
so,
everything.
Yes. So now you can go to the parks and start counting credits.
Oh,
and so
I don't think they have to go that far, honey.
They don't have to. They can if they want to. So.
Okay.
So, and if you already were kind of into this, but just been listening to the show and wanted to know more about kind of the things we talk about on a bi-weekly basis during our episodes, now hopefully you have a better understanding of the things that we talk about. So, well, I won't go on any more spiels. I've talked enough, obviously, going through this whole guide. So just want to say thank you for tuning in. And I'm sure I missed some things. So if you want to comment on the episode and, include any other things that I may have skipped down or missed, feel free to do so. And be sure to tune into our upcoming episodes where we'll actually talk about roller coaster history. That's kind of our bread and butter here. We really enjoy talking about roller coaster history. Lots of funny things. Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Lots of things gluten-free bread and dairy-free butter. So that's what we like talking about here on the podcast, and we have fun doing it. So thank you for tuning in to this beginner's guide to roller coasters, and we will see you in the next episode.